On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the NTSB has issued a damn report. Really? That's the way we're going to open up this episode? YouTube is not going to be happy. Oh, hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So back on March 28th of 2023, about 2:24 local time, the tow vessel Queen City was downbound on the Ohio River, pushing an 11-barge tow in extremely high water conditions. It's at that point that the tow struck the Vane Dike at the arrival point for the McAlpin Locks and Dam near Louisville, Kentucky. The tows broke apart and went for basically an Ohio River ride down the dam and created a lot of consternation in and around the area of Louisville. Now, fortunately, there was no pollution, there was no injuries, but the total amount of damage was nearly $2 million. We're going to go back and take a look at this. We looked at it back in March, but now the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, has their report out. So we're going to do our best Juan Brown impersonation and break down this report and see what happened. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So friend of the channel, Mike Scholler over at G-Captain has this story about the events as they transpired. I'll have the link in the show notes for you. This is the report. We're going to take you through it. It's not a very long report, just 14 pages, and details the events as they transpired. The event took place on the Ohio River. This is the track of the vessel from where it started until it got down toward Louisville. Now, before we jump into this story, I just want to take 1 minute and talk about why this is really important to understand. The United States, along with many other countries around the world, rely on inland water traffic to move a large quantity of its cargo throughout its interiors. Whether you're in the United States, Europe, South America, Asia, inland water is absolutely essential. This is from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics annual report on transportation in the United States. This is at the very end of Chapter 1 because inland waterways are basically at the bottom of the list of things to talk about. But this shows you the monthly downbound barge tonnage at Mississippi Lock and Dam 27 in 2021, 2022, and 2023. Now, this took place in March, right at the beginning of the season, where we tend to historically see that big uptick as we see barge and traffic move. This chart shows you freight rates and how freight rates typically will begin to spike late in the season as you're trying to get grain down the river at its highest peak demand. So to emphasize why inland waterway traffic is so essential, especially here in the United States, I'll show you a couple of slides that give you the capability and the benefits of using inland transportation. So this chart shows you what you get from a towboat and its tows. So one barge can carry the equivalent of 27,500 barrels of liquid cargo. And in the case of the incident here, we actually do see a fully loaded barge with liquid get involved. That's enough to keep 2,500 automobiles running for an entire year. In terms of the grain barges, well, one covered hopper barge can carry up to 58,333 bushels of wheat, enough to make 2.5 million loaves of bread. They also are much more efficient in terms of the tons you can carry per mile. You can get 616 tons per mile per gallon of fuel versus only 150 for a truck or 478 for rail. And most importantly is the amount of CO2 emissions per million in ton miles. And then finally, below St. Louis and the locks and the dam system, you'll see much larger towboat operations, maybe up to 45 barges. But above it, you typically see 15 barge tows, although they will string together more barges. They just have to break them up to go through the locks. But a single 15 barge tow can carry the equivalent of 216 rail cars or over 1,000 tractor trailers. So that gives you a little background on why this is so essential. Let's get into the details of the events as they transpired that day. Here's a synopsis from the NTSB report where it was involved. There were 7 people on board the towboat at the time of the incident. The weather was clear with just a light wind from the north. Air temperature is about 43 degrees, clear visibility. The river at its width is about 1,350 yards, depth about 18 feet. But the key thing here is there was a large current, about 2 to 3 knots. The river was at a very high point, as we will discuss. This is the towboat Queen City. It's owned and operated by C&B Marine Equipment. It was built back in 1974, 103 feet long, steel-hulled towing vessels. While they call these towing vessels, they push. They're push boats. And the reason you push on the rivers versus towing on the rivers is because you get more control by pushing the barges. You put the propeller and the rudder system and the power at the back of the vessel. If you have to tow and put them on a long line and pull them, they'll be bouncing off the banks. The vessel had 2 steering and 4 flanking rudders. These vessels have a lot of control abilities with them, and 2 1,500 diesel engines, each driving a propeller. The Vane Dike is located in a river bend just off the eastern end of the entrance to Portland Channel, which leads to the McAlpin Locks. The dike measured 200 yards by 10 yards and extends eastward from the end of Shippingport Island, the northern land boundary of the Portland Channel. There is a mooring cell at the end of the dike. This image gives you a better view. The top image there is looking downriver, so you're coming from east toward the west. When you are on board the Queen City, you want to be to the left of the Vane Dike and the mooring cell. You want to head between Shippingport Island and Kentucky. To the right, that takes you down toward the dam section, and you can see there the Louisville and Indiana Railway Bridge. The image on the lower part there shows you a towboat heading into the lock system the way they want. There is a bridge there, a lift bridge to get under the rail system on the left side. That's what the Queen City with its 11 barges was aiming for that morning. So on March 25th, the Ohio River in Louisville was experiencing its highest level of 2023. At 8:08, the McAlpin Locks and Dam upper gauge on the Ohio River rose above 13 feet. Now, when that happened, the Coast Guard activated the Vessel Traffic Service in Louisville, and that's in accordance with their Waterways Action Plan. Vessels required to check in with the VTS when they were operating on the Ohio River. At 8:09, the Waterways Action Plan moved to an action phase, defined as when the McAlpin Dam gates were fully open and the upper gauge was approaching 15 feet and rising. At this phase, the Water Action Plan described the river as extreme high water, extreme high flow conditions. And here you see the amount of water in cubic feet per second that was moving through this area. One of the things I like to say all the time is I sailed on the ocean. I worked as a merchant mariner, and a lot of people have romantic notions of the ocean and water, and I love being out on the water. I love being on a boat. I love everything about the water. But let me be clear, the water wants to kill you. That's all water ever wants to do. It is figuring out a way to screw you up and kill you. It is looking for any little fault. And when you're on a river at that high of a volume and that much water flowing, it is extremely dangerous. The amount and force of water always gets everyone. No one ever realizes how heavy water is, 8.3 pounds per gallon. That's U.S. measurements. So it is a lot of force. And then when it's moving under force, it's even worse. So that just a few knots of speed can take you off your feet, and let alone deal with a towboat and 11 barges. So this was the configuration of Queen City as she headed for the McAlpin Dam. Queen City is right here. This is the back end of the tow. So it is pushing. Up forward, you'll see the barges, and barges are numbered and identified. So it has a series of 11 barges, 2 in the forward row, and then 3 rows of 3. 2 forward ones are empty. Then the next row has an empty one, has 1 full of corn and 1 full of methanol. The methanol is going to come back and play here in a minute. Third row has got 2 corn and an empty one in the middle, and then the last one is full with corn. We're going to hop on over to marine traffic to follow the path of Queen City down the Ohio River. On March 27th at 0600, the Queen City departed from a fleeting area at mile 482 on the Ohio River in Hebron, Kentucky. Now, there's a 4-hour difference here between UTC and local time that I've adjusted for. The towing vessel was pushing 12 barges and was headed for Paducah, Kentucky, located downriver at mile 934. The tow stopped to drop off a tank barge at mile 539.6 and then proceeded on its route, pushing the remaining 11 barges. So on March 28th at 0218, the pilot was alone in the wheelhouse as the Queen City passed through the 802-foot wide channel span of the Clark Memorial Highway Bridge. The entrance to the lock was 800 yards downriver. The pilot told investigators that as soon as he cleared the bridge, The current started grabbing me. It wasn't looking good. So he ordered the on-watch deckhand to get the captain. The vessel was on the sailing line at 02:20:24. So this is the vessel coming under the bridge right there. The time mark here on our video is 06:20, or that is 02:20 and 7 seconds, so just a few seconds off here. So here's Queen City coming under the Clark Memorial Bridge. It is heading at this time for the channel, heading toward the dam. Here's the lift rail bridge that is up at that moment. This shows you, this is a Google Earth shot, so these vessels that you're seeing here, the actual vessels you're seeing here, are not there. Queen City is heading at this point, trying to head in. They want to head here as close to the bank as you can. Water is coming down the Ohio River in a huge torrent. So one of the unique things about the river in the vicinity of Louisville is the amount of fall off from the river. So up here is Pittsburgh, and then you follow the river through the lock and dam system all the way down the river. Now this is McAlpin right here, just above Louisville. But when you look below here, this shows you the change in height. You're 710 feet above sea level in Pittsburgh. And then when you get down to Cairo, you're down to 250. But the thing to note right here is Louisville is the amount of drop right here at McAlpin. There's a big drop off. So there is a big force of water that is spilling down the waterway at this time. So as Queen City is trying to get into this narrow little channel here, there's no water moving here. This is like almost like a tidal basin because the lock is closed. There's not water flowing. So this is just a big basin. All the water is flowing down here and spilling over the dam. Matter of fact, when they took this picture, you can see the water spilling over the dam here. And that is going to try to pull the Queen City up north. And as we let this play here, you'll see Queen City begin to drift. Now you got to remember, you're not seeing the barges on the front. There's a big, huge tow here of four barge lengths in front. And then it proceeds to hit. And what you see here is Queen City then begins to drift. The barges break loose. Some of them spill down into Portland Channel here, but others start going down the Ohio River. And then what you see is Queen City attempt to grab some of the barges before they hit and get hung up here along the bridge. This is the rail bridge in the area. So reading from the report, again, the pilot had stated that the current started grabbing me and it wasn't looking good. Those are his exact words. The captain got out of his bed, and when a deckhand told him the pilot wanted assistance in the wheelhouse, the captain heard the general alarm sound. On the way to the wheelhouse, the captain felt the Queen City strike the Vane Dike mooring cell. In the moments before the contact, the AAS showed the tow setting farther to the north or to the right of the sailing line in the tow's intended track. At 02:24 and 38 seconds, the tow had been pulled about 109 yards to the right of the sailing line. That's the track line they want to follow, in the direction of the lower dam gates. The vessel was moving sideways toward the lower dam gates at about 33 yards per minute, or 1.1 miles per hour. The tow broke apart after striking the Van Dyke mooring cell. The Queen City crew retrieved one barge and tied it off to a nearby fleeting area. Another towing vessel crew retrieved another barge and tied it off to the same fleeting area. 6 barges went through the lower dam gates. 3 were pinned against the lower dam gates, and the only barge with hazardous material was included in them, one with methanol. Due to the immediate threat to the public safety associated with the flammability of methanol, air and water monitoring began, and the river was closed. A unified command was established that included local, state, and federal agencies, as well as representatives of the vessel owner and operator. The vessel owner-operator activated their response plan. A designated salver responded on scene and completed the water and air monitoring, conducting vessel surveys, developed lightering and salvage plans, and lightered the methanol barge while it was pinned against the dam, and salvaged all the remaining barges. This is an image of 2 of the barges that were pinned. The one on the left sunk there is one of the open hopper barges, but it's the one in the middle there, IB 1938. That barge was pushed up against the dam. It was not pushed under, so they were able to bring in another barge and pump off the methanol. So the report goes on. The Queen City was not damaged. 9 barges of the 11 were damaged, and that was an estimated cost of about $1.475 million. And then there was about $500,000 of lost cargo, corn. The pilot had been working for 7 years on the river, 2 years of which as a mate or a pilot. He held credentials as a master of towing vessels upon the western rivers, and he'd been employed by C&B Marine for 2 years and was the pilot for Queen City for 1.5 years. He was on a 2-week on, 2-week off rotation and had just returned to the vessel on March 23rd. He told investigators that the largest tow he had pushed was 20 barges and estimated that he had transited the McAlpin locks downriver about 15 times. He further said this is the highest water he had ever experienced in his transit. In some previous transits, he recalled the water being as high as 14 or 15 feet. Remember, this was at 18 feet. The captain held credentials of a towing vessel for 4 years. He'd been working on towing vessels for 24 years, not unusual on inland waters to have personnel with that level of experience. He also was on a 2-week, 2-on, 2-off schedule and came back on March 23rd. After the casualty, they were both tested for alcohol and drugs, and they came up negative. At the time of the casualty, the river gauge on the McAlpin locks measured 17.5 feet. That is a water flow of 400,000 cubic feet per second of water. These measurements were nearly the highest compared to readings during the previous 12 months. So the Mississippi and Ohio Valley and tributaries water action plan contained information about high water operations on the Ohio River. And according to their executive summary, quote, the overall goal of this plan is to ensure safety of life and navigation, protection of infrastructure and property, and to prevent marine casualties. It did contain a note regarding this. The Van Dike at the entrance of the Louisville and Portland Canal experiences strong outdrafts at the upstream and during high flows. It also warned mariners that the potential for vessel allisions with McAlpin Lock and Dam tends to increase as water rises and currents increase. Vessels experience outdraft, that's the pulling of the vessel toward the dams, while entering southbound Portland Canal. Mariners are advised to exercise extreme caution, enter chambers at slowest safe speed, and prepare for potential outdrafts. During high water conditions, industry may reduce tow size to allow more positive control over the tow to be more effective utilizing towboat horsepower. C&B Marine did not have any specific guidance regarding high water at the dam. The company's towing policy required a 250 horsepower per barge ratio for hopper, tank, and empty barges. The company's fleet size trigger point job aid limited the number of loads at the river stages at certain locations on the Ohio. The company's voyage planning guidance document instructed towing vessels to consider the river stage and drift. So the NTSB analysis had this. The captain of the port, Sector Ohio Valley, had not imposed any restrictions on the waterway before Queen City struck the Van Dyke. In the past, a captain of the port, in coordination with other river stakeholders, had restricted the waterway to daylight-only transits when the water level reached 18 feet. Remember, we were just under that. It goes on here, the captain and the pilot could have reduced the number of barges, providing a larger horsepower to barge ratio. However, they decided to steer to compensate for the set from the outdraft. The pilot and the captain had discussed the transit, and the captain told the pilot to keep the tow above to the left of the sailing line. They did not discuss reducing the number of barges. Goes on, although the pilot attempted to steer the tow to the left, he did not anticipate the strength of the outdraft and the effect on the tow. Consequently, his approach to the channel upon passing through the Clark Memorial Highway did not effectively compensate for the outdraft that set the tow onto the Vane Dike. So we get to the conclusion of the NTSB report. The National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of the contact of the Queen City tow with the Vane Dike, not Van Dyke, it's not Dick, was the pilot not effectively compensating for the strong outdraft while navigating toward the lock channel entrance during a period of high flow conditions. I don't think there's any massive surprise here about that conclusion. Lessons learned. High currents resulting from high water pose unique hazards for vessels transiting inland rivers. In addition, near dams, greater dam openings and high water conditions lead to high flow rates, which can produce outdraft currents near the dam. Mariners should thoroughly assess the potential impact of outdraft currents when entering or exiting locking channels. Vessel horsepower and vessel handling should be carefully considered. Mariners should also consult available resources such as waterway action plans and company policies when passage planning. So not really too much there in terms of recommendations. Obviously, hopefully the ship's company now has imposed some changes in this. I would also think that the vessel traffic service being provided in the area, along with the Army Corps of Engineers, are rethinking about some issues regarding vessel movement in and around dams during high water marks. When you're reaching the highest level you've ever recorded, there has to be some notices and concerns out there. This took place at 2 in the morning. You did not have your entire crew awake, including the master of the vessel. That's a bit of a problem. Obviously, what should have been done is the master should have been up on the bridge, at least providing assistance for the pilot as they maneuver it in. And again, it may not have been bad to have another boat on standby to help nudge them in there, or again, to take the barges in sections, take maybe 6 through at a time, get into that basin, reattach them. But the problem is that slows everything down. It's money, it's cost. We're always kind of weighing these issues between cost benefit analysis and risk. And in this case, the risk kind of overcame the cost benefit. Now, fortunately, nobody was hurt. The environmental issues were negligible at this, but it could have been worse. Obviously, there could have been a substantial spill. You had a lot of water moving through the area, so even with the methanol leak from the barge and spill, it was not a significant one. There was water testing done in the area. However, this is a good indication of why we need some oversight on this. What the U.S. Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers does on our inland water systems are not given enough credit. Neither is that of the crews who operate the inland barges and tows in our river system. They are essential for our economy. And the job that this pilot and mate did, along with the other crew members on board, is essential. This pilot made a misjudgment. He misjudged, thought he can get the towboat in there, misjudged it, and the accident happened. Did he do it on purpose? No. Was he violating any rules or standing orders? No. Did he push the edge of the envelope? Yeah, maybe a bit. But he thought he can do it. And let me be clear, I know a lot of mariners. They think they can do everything. We live on this idea that we can do amazing things with boats and ships. I don't find that at all odd. However, we do have to have measures in place so that, hey, let's take it easy here. Let's put these in places. Let's put these rules in place so that this does not happen again. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You can hit the super thanks button down below. You can head on over to Patreon, become a monthly, yearly subscriber. You can share this across social media, give it a big thumbs up. You can subscribe and like. There's a whole batch of things you can do to support the page. Until our next video, this is Sal, signing off.